Welcome to Talking Politics with Billy Mack and EZ. And thank you to our sponsor, Michael Best Strategies. Today on our episode, we're going to talk about the U.S. Senate race and the legislature. Good to see you again, EZ.
Good to be back with you, Billy Mack.
First question. U.S. Senate primary on the Democratic side. We got 10 people in the race. It appears there's only 4 that are truly in the race competitively. What's your take on the race? The latest Marquette poll has Alex Lasry closing the gap with current Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Where do you see that race shaking out?
I see this as really heating up in the next 100 days. We're basically at the 100-day mark of the race. And Alex Lasry has shown one of the axioms of politics, and that is money matters. He's poured $3 to $4 million into this race, almost all of it exclusively onto television, and it's having an impact. At the same time, my own view is that if Mandela were to ask me for advice, and he hasn't, and I'm not asking that he would, but I think he's sitting on his lead. I think he's doing things that aren't conducive to trying to expand his opportunity to be that front runner. He's still the front runner, but boy, that gap is closing. And I think, and just before we came to tape this, word was leaking out that he was starting to tape an ad to get back up on, or to get on TV for the first time. But you have to understand, and I think this is my view, Alex Lasry will be on TV until the end of this campaign.
Right.
He's not going to come off the air. And I think it's going to get stronger and more aggressive because now he sees that it's working. So he's closed the gap. So Mandela's got to do more than a Barnes tour for Barnes.
Right.
He's got to get up on TV.
So when this race started, Republicans like myself thought that Barnes would be the odds-on favorite to win this race. I still think he's the front runner, probably the favorite. But like you, I think he sat on his lead, and it might ultimately cost him. This is a guy like Tony Evers in 2018. That was a 10-person primary for governor. He won that largely because he had the most name ID. Well, Mandela Barnes has the most name ID in this race by purposes of being the lieutenant governor. He should be further ahead than he is. I think they've made a tactical mistake by letting Alex Lasry close that gap. And I'll say this about Lasry. I don't know whether he can win. I think Ron Johnson is comfortable running against Alex Lasry, but he's built a pretty important coalition from the Democratic side of the aisle, and that's the trade unions. They're all with Alex Lasry. So that's a piece of the Democratic coalition that Mandela Barnes isn't going to get. So what does he replace that with?
I think that Alex has built some good support among some of the unions, but I think you're going to need more than that to win a statewide primary. And particularly with someone like Mandela Barnes, an incumbent lieutenant governor, who does have the better name ID, although Alex is picking up on his too, that I think that it's going to have to be more than trade unions for Alex Lasry to win. And I think, Mandela has 2 sort of bases to work from, and that is Madison and Dane County, right, which are where all the Democratic, not all, but a lot of the Democratic votes are. But we're leaving out Sarah Godlewski and we're leaving out Tom Nelson. And I don't think we can do that yet, but the window is closing on them quickly. Sarah has to make the decision, does she want to pour more money in? She gained a little bit in this last poll by Marquette.
Yep.
She moved up a little bit, so she's got to go, do I need to pour more money in? And that's going to be personal money. And whether or not she does that is going to be a big issue. Tom Nelson's got to figure out, am I waiting for my fine gold moment, as everyone says, when this race starts to crystallize, or do I create that fine gold moment? I think we're at the point with about 100 days left where Tom Nelson has to create that fine gold moment rather than wait for it.
For those of you not familiar with the Feingold moment, in the 1992 U.S. Senate primary, Joe Chakota and Jim Moody were the 2 front-running Democrats. Russ Feingold was third. They blew each other up 30 days out from the primary, and Feingold shot up the middle, and he had almost no name ID in middle of July. He ends up winning the primary and then defeating 2-term incumbent Bob Caston.
And I think that's going to be an interesting thing, and, that happened to Feingold, and he capitalized on it. I don't think Mandela Barnes and Alex Lasry are going to go at each other like Chakota and Moody did. I think they're going to take little jabs. I think they're both going to be with their own semi-positive message on TV. So that's why I say I don't know that he can wait for that moment. Tom Nelson, the county executive of Outagamie County, he may have to create that moment. They've all been pretty nice to each other throughout. Tom started to ratchet it up a little bit. I think if he's going to try to find some way to sprint ahead, he's going to have to ratchet it up more. I'm not saying he needs to go negative, but that's what I'm thinking.
How does Godlewski get in the mix? I agree with you, Easy, that she waited too long tactically. She had some money early on. She had Emily's List. It looked like she had some momentum last summer, and then she sort of didn't do much in her campaign for the last half of 21 and the first half of 22.
I know this is going to sound simple, but really, when you're facing someone like an incumbent lieutenant governor who's got broad name ID statewide, and someone who's got an incredible amount of financial resources, she's kind of stuck in between. She's got some name ID as state treasurer. She's got some financial resources through her family and herself. She's got to decide, what am I going to do? And I think what she's going to have to decide, this is my view, is that you're going to have to spend more money. You're going to have to up the ante for yourself.
Question.
That's the only way I think she can sprint ahead. Now, whether that comes through Emily's List or some kind of super PAC or her own or a combination of it, that's where I think she needs to get to. Otherwise, she's going to be stuck in that third position.
Well, and the clock's ticking. It's not like she's got a lot of time to figure that out. They need to be cutting ads. They have to have a crisper message, I think, going forward. Her first two ads were okay. I don't think they distinguished her necessarily. Maybe with Democratic primary voters, you would know better than I, but I didn't think that they set her apart.
Well, she did a good job, I thought, on that prescription drug bill. The prescription prices. That's a good issue that resonates well with Democratic voters, and it's an issue that probably transcends Democratic voters. The other one was more of an introductory ad, the soft, here's who I am, here's what my family's like, that kind of thing. I think she's going to need to probably ratchet up the messages you're saying and also ratchet up the spending. That's really what it amounts to. When you're in a race like this, and you have someone like Alex who has basically unlimited resources, right, and he is going to spend, and this is not hyperbole, he is going to spend millions more on TV.
No question.
And when you're in that position and you have Mandela, who's got the statewide name ID, you can't sit back and kind of be mediocre about these things. You got to get in there and fight it a little harder. That means spending more money.
And Lasry's got some connective tissue for voters in his position with the Bucks. Even though he's taken a leave of absence, the people are following the Bucks. They're the defending NBA champions. They're off to a good start in these playoffs. So the deeper they go, the more that connective tissue sinks in with voters, I think.
So let me put you on the spot. Does a second back-to-back repeat championship for the Bucks mean that Alex gets the trophy for the Senate nomination? Can that catapult him too?
I don't think so. I still think Barnes is the favorite in this race, but he's going to have to get working. It's no longer a given. He's going to have to work the final 100 days, put some ads on that distinguish himself. I think the Democratic base is more aligned with him, and as you said correctly, Easy, the Democratic base is really in Milwaukee County and Dane County, and he's got a pretty good foothold in both of those.
So no one's really watching this, Billy. But for those who are, give them a little bit of advice. Who do the Republicans want to run against?
I think Ron Johnson would be totally fine with Mandela Barnes because he's the most liberal, probably, other than Thomas Nelson. But Nelson's going to have to get lucky. He's going to need some breaks
Nelson's
to win.
more of a Proxmire.
He's going to need some breaks. Alex Lasry, I don't think Ron Johnson has any problem running against. Sort of the kid with the silver spoon versus the guy who's been there for 2 terms fighting for the people of Wisconsin. And I think the one that we were a little bit nervous about a year ago was Sarah Godlewski, but so far that race hasn't gotten off the ground.
Tell me from a Republican standpoint, when we looked at the poll of Marquette's late in April, Ron Johnson was pretty deep underwater.
Yeah.
And he's running what I believe, and I haven't looked at the buy, but from what I see and where it's at, probably a multi-million-dollar TV ad campaign trying to soften him up with the Joseph Project,
yep,
and then the right to try legislation with the tiers and the families and things. And now he's shifted to a kind of Donald Trump-esque message with let's beat up the liberals, let's beat up Nancy Pelosi, let's beat up the media. And he's running against those things. So tell me, where do you see Ron Johnson in this race going?
His numbers improved a little bit. Here's what I would tell our viewers is...
What do you mean by that?
In the Marquette poll, his favorables went from 33% to 36 or 37%. What I would tell the viewers at home and those watching this is don't worry about that. Ron Johnson was the underdog in 2010 when he beat incumbent Russ Feingold. He was the underdog in 2016 when he beat Russ Feingold the second time. He'll be the underdog all the way until the day before the election on this race, and I still think he's going to win. I believe Ron Johnson is the favorite for this, and I'll tell you why. He's caught 3 waves. 2010 was a GOP wave. 2016 was a GOP wave. 2022 will be a GOP wave, and the base loves Ron Johnson. They'll fight to the death to get that guy elected, so don't worry about what his poll numbers say today. The only race poll that matters for him is on Election Day. He's going to win.
I think the problem with this time through with Ron Johnson is that there's quite a bit of baggage on him this time through. I think his comments about
seasoning, I'd call it.
Seasoning.
He's been seasoned.
Seasoning. That's an interesting way to say that he's got baggage. I think his comments about mouthwash, and I think his comments to combat COVID, and I think his comments on the
turned out to be
Oshkosh
true.
Truck, not quite. But if I were a candidate running against him, I'd be handing out mouthwash, little bottles that you get, for travel packs. I'd be handing it out at every campaign stop.
I hope they're not listening to you. That's a good one.
To remind people how unscientific, I'll call it. Did I say that nicely?
Turns
unscientific.
out it was potential.
I don't think so.
Mitigated.
I don't see that on the list of things to try to do. I think that
Johnson's going to be well funded. This is going to be the most expensive race in United States, in Wisconsin's history for United States Senate, no question.
Both candidates in that race overall will have more than enough resources, because the truth is the control of the Senate may hinge on that Wisconsin race.
Yeah, I think that's entirely correct. So, President Biden, can he play in this race? Does he play in this race? Does the fact, EZ, that his numbers are significantly lower than Tony Evers, does that hurt the ultimate nominee for the Democratic nomination or not?
It doesn't help like you'd want it to help. It's not going to be a positive, but he is still the president of the United States. He showed late in April at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he still got a lot of pizzazz. He gave a great speech filled with humor. I loved his line where he said, it's good to be among all the reporters, the only ones who have lower poll numbers than me. And I thought it was a good line. And he said, the other thing that was kind of interesting, he said something like, it's good to be here with all the people who, you can't be in here unless you're vaccinated, and that shows at work. Just ask all the people from Fox News who are here, because you had to be vaccinated and tested in order to come into the event. I still think it would be advantageous to have the president come, because it stirs up our base. I don't know that the same is true of the former president, Donald J. Trump, for him to come out, because in that last poll, his numbers were really a lot worse.
I'm going to take a slightly different tack than you are. I don't think Biden can come here. I think he ultimately hurts both Tony Evers and the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. I'll tell you, if Lasry does get through the primary, who you might see here is Barack Obama, who Lasry actually worked for when he was president of the United States. And Obama's still got some cachet. So what's your last thing for this week's episode?
I think the thing I would say is that Marquette poll showed that Ron Johnson has really got a lot of work to do, and he's going to throw a lot of money into trying to rebuilding that image.
My last thing is Donald Trump again. I think Donald Trump could be a factor in the U.S. Senate race. He's obviously a strong supporter of Ron Johnson. I think Johnson will bring him in early, probably in the summer. Whether he plays here in the fall remains to be seen. But look for Trump to have an outsized role in that race, too.
All right, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll talk to our friends and viewers who decide to come and tune in. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.